Story 1, The Free Gift. I was 17 working nights at McDonald's. I'd saved cash, bought a beat-up 2003 Jaguar X-Type, and spent every break texting some girl from school like my life had already turned into a movie. The city I lived in was small, 50,000 people, one main street, a few rough pockets where everyone knew not to stop at night unless you had to. My shift ended at 11:30. The parking lot was a rectangle of sodium lamps that buzzed like old insects. On a Tuesday, I was sitting in my car with the heater on and the radio low, trying not to think about math homework, when a woman about my mom's age tapped my window. She looked like a regular, cheap coat, beaten boots, but her eyes were glassy and watery. She smelt like cigarettes and something floral. She didn't seem dangerous. She knocked and I rolled the window down. She said things fast like she was trying to get words out before the words left. "Can you help me?" she said. "My boyfriend, he's been following me. I just need a ride to the library." Her voice broke on the last syllable. At that time of night, library sounded weird, but small towns have late-night readers and students. I shrugged. I was young, I thought being kind was a cheap good. I told her, "Okay," and hit the unlock. She squeezed into the back like a cat, clutching a small brown paper bag. The car smelled of fries and motor oil. I took a route that avoided the main drag, an alley with a strip of cracked sidewalk, a place she hadn't expected. Eventually we passed a cluster of police cars at an apartment block. Lights off, officers milling. She folded down in the back like she wanted to be invisible. She kept murmuring, "He did it." I didn't do anything. It was him. I dropped her near the library and watched her disappear between the stacks of night and lamplight. She didn't go inside the police station that sat 2 streets over. She went somewhere else. I went back to work, shook it off, and made fries until bleach made the air taste like nothing. Later, standing behind the register, I told the supervisor what happened. He nodded the way older people do when you tell them something unfixing, like you've shown them a spider and they don't want to see it. Days passed. I forgot her face except when I saw her by the dumpster across the street. She would stand there, humming to herself, clutching that same brown paper bag. Once, when the lot was empty, I spotted her hand reach into the bag and pull something small and glinting. I couldn't tell what it was. My gut told me to call it in, but my brain told me that small towns love gossip and the police love paperwork more than they loved chasing a woman with a paper bag. A week later, the city went quiet the way it does when something too loud happens. There was a line of cars outside the police station and murmured voices at the gas pumps. An officer came into the restaurant and asked if anyone had seen a woman matching the description. He said something else too, not to us exactly, more as if telling the walls. "There's an ongoing investigation," he said. "We found a body." Bodies in small towns have a way of flattening time. Suddenly conversations get shorter. People smile less. I felt my stomach drop in a way I'd never felt. That same night, the woman was missing. The bag she carried was found behind the library, half torn. Inside was something that made my palms go slick. A set of teeth wrapped in a napkin. One of the detectives later asked me routine questions. Did I give the woman a ride? Did I notice anything odd? I told the truth. I told him about the library, about the police cars, about the way her voice trembled. He asked for details I couldn't have known mattered. When he asked if I had taken anything from the car that night, I felt stupid and ashamed. "No," I said. "Just fries and a radio." Days later, my mother called and told me to stop sitting in the car on breaks. We're a small family, news reaches in seconds. A friend from the shop texted, "You really gave her a ride? They think she was involved." My head swam. I replayed every small scene in my mind and tried to decide if a kind thing had been a reckless one. Weeks after that, I woke up to a voicemail from the detective. He said they'd found DNA in the bag. He didn't say anything else, but his voice had a crack that told me I'd be up in their files forever now. I dropped my phone and the voicemail corrupted into a stuttering hum. The worst part wasn't that she might have been involved. The worst part is the thing that keeps me awake sometimes. The paper bag. After the body, after the evidence markers, I thought about the small napkin I had seen in the bag the first night. I kept seeing the bag on the passenger seat between the fries in my hand, like an object-sized echo. I wondered, did I hand it to her? Did I put something inside? Did I really just drive a woman with stained hands right past the police station? Months later I sold the Jag. I couldn't look at it without seeing her silhouette pressed into the back seat. Even now, if I smell cigarettes and dish soap together, the image slides across my eyes. The glint of teeth in a brown bag, a woman's hand trembling, a body gone. Sometimes in the quiet after midnight I hear the scratch of a napkin against paper, and the small town sleeps around the lie I told myself that night, that I did a good thing. And sometimes, when I reach into my pocket, I can still feel the rough edge of the paper bag, like a phantom souvenir I never asked for. Story 2, The Hole in the Door. They told me I'd grow out of it. I'm 21 now, and these images have been stalking me like bad static for months. I'll try to tell this cleanly, but the first lines always tangle because I keep wanting to apologize to the person I used to be, the one who thought a door was just a door. I moved into a cheap apartment with creaky floors and landlords who wore out their smiles. My room was small, My bed and desk were inches apart. At night I'd lie in bed and stare at the monitor, the glow a band of blue under the dark. My dog Barney had a weird hobby. He chewed doors. Not the whole door, just the bottom corner. We'd replaced 2 doors already. The hole was a jagged crescent that looked like a tooth mark. I told myself it was a dog thing. One night, lying with my laptop in sleep mode, I saw something move in that little crescent. It wasn't Barney. It was a flash of black at the edge, a negative space come alive. For a second my head told me it was a shadow, a trick of the streetlight. For a second after that the image burned in, a hoof. Not a dog paw. A hard, cloven hoof, pale and knuckled like something from a barn legend. It filled the hole and then retreated. I laughed loud enough to make my lungs hurt and told myself I was being dramatic. Depression has a way of making your head into a theater. But then it happened again. A shape at the door, a sliver of bone against paint. Once I saw the outline of a long spine and something like a deer skull leaning in. It had the posture of something that had forgotten human rules and thought a threshold was a suggestion. It didn't move in immediately, it just watched. It was patient that I started sleeping with my back to the wall. I put a chair against the doorknob and plugged in a lamp that made everything grainy and everything else seem alive. My therapist called it imagery, a symptom of the deep sleep-deprived mind and a decade of sadness. She suggested grounding exercises and sleep hygiene. I tried. I turned off screens earlier. I put lavender on my pillow. The door still creaked. The worst nights were the ones the brain couldn't file as dreams. I'd be awake and the images would stream through me, not fuzzy, not dreamlike, but terrifyingly crisp. I'd see a figure in my doorway with hooves that clicked faintly on the threshold like a clock counting down. In the long, slow seconds I would have to decide whether to look directly at it or pretend it was not there. Both choices felt dangerous. Once I pushed the door open and found nothing but chewed wood. The crescent hole was larger, new teeth marks around the edges. There were fine scratches inside like someone had dragged a rope. But no hoof prints on the floor. That contradiction made my neck crawl. If something big enough to put a hoof in the hole had visited, why no prints? Why did it choose small access points like a creature who preferred peeking? Neighbors started asking if my dog was okay. I lied. I told them it was behavioral and we were working on it. I couldn't say I'd seen a skull at my threshold. Who would believe a 21-year-old with therapy notes and a dead grandmother story? One evening Barney stopped chewing. He used to whine because he had this habit of being dramatic about things. He settled down and stared, and that stare was directed at the hole in the door. He didn't whine. He watched. When I walked to the kitchen his ears snapped back. He padded after me, then lunged at the hallway and yelped like something had pushed a cold hand along his spine. The sound made my blood turn to ice. He wouldn't touch the door after that, he wouldn't even go near it. I thought maybe it was time to move. We could afford it barely. I packed a box, left a small lamp on, and went to a friend's place for 2 nights. The second night my friend texted, "Are you seeing weird doors too?" He sent a photo and it was of his own door with chewed wood and a ragged hole. He lived 3 blocks away. He'd been seeing the same things, the shadow in the crescent, the hoof, the animals too afraid to touch the bottom of the door. Around the neighborhood, small animals were acting strange. Cats refused to cross certain thresholds. Birds avoided some trees. People joked because small towns have to laugh or they'll scream, but the joke's thinner by the week. Once, in the small hours, I had the courage, or the foolishness, to block the hole completely. I nailed a scrap of plywood, painted it a dull gray, and balanced the chair back against the door like a makeshift seal. I slept for maybe an hour. In the middle of that hour I woke to a sound like a branch scraping glass. It was right there on the other side of the plywood. Not a hoof this time, more like something heavy and skeletal pushing against wood, testing the seal. The sound had rhythm and rhythm has intention. It went on for minutes. Then, as suddenly, it stopped. I left that day. I packed faster than I'd ever packed anything, heart hammering, hands numb from fear. I drove away with Barney shaking in the passenger seat like a small frightened thunderstorm. I thought the distance would fix it, a rational, clean solution. For a while it did. We slept. The images faded. But 2 weeks later I got a photo. My neighbor had taped a picture to my door, the kind landlords do when someone leaves. It had my name on it and a note, in blue ink, slanted and uneven. "We only peek where you watch." There's no satisfying answer. Maybe it's trauma. Maybe it's a shared psychosis that crops up when a community carries the same weight. Maybe the world has room for things that look through your keyholes. I can say one true thing. There are nights I wake and the stale space near my bed smells like hay and old bone. And there are mornings Barney refuses to walk past the place where the door used to be. The last message on my door wasn't a joke. It was a warning stitched into the paint. Stop looking back. Story 3, The Mirror Message. I work a boring 9 to 5 in an insurance office in a building that smells like burnt coffee and printer ink. Our floor had that normalized quiet of people who manage other people's disasters for a living. The 3rd floor bathroom was a place of quick breaks and polite nods. That Tuesday I left my cubicle to stretch and saw the hallway almost empty, the kind of hush that makes your steps loud. I pushed the bathroom door open and the smell hit me first. Metallic, sharp. Then the sight. The sink rims splattered with dark red and a messy message across the mirror written with a finger. The letters were shaky but legible. He already knows your favorite order. My first thought was someone trying to creep me out. My second thought was darker. Who was he? Who watched me enough to know that I ordered turkey and Swiss on wheat? I knew my coworkers' habits better than I liked to, not intimate things but little patterns. I never thought twice about the sandwich I ordered every day. I took photos because people do that now, proof before panic. The janitor was not yet on his rounds. The splatters were warm. The message looked recent. For the rest of the day I was a mess of glances and paranoia. I saw people head towards the restroom and come back like nothing had happened. Did they not see it? Had they chosen to ignore it? Or had someone cleaned it? My head furnished 100 conspiracies. At lunch I tested it. I avoided my usual place and walked past the sandwich counter. Tony, the sandwich guy, glanced up. He looked off like someone who had been shown a small hidden picture. He said, "No lunch today?" as if reciting the line I'd probably say. His eyes tracked me in a way that felt like a measurement. I left. I ate something soggy at my desk and tried to concentrate. When I went back to the bathroom that afternoon, everything was clean. Sanitized, bright, smelling like lemon. The mirror had been wiped and the words were gone. But the memory of the message stuck to my mind like a burr. Who wanted me to be the one who needed to be hospitalized? That private phrase owed me an answer. 3 days later I got a call at my desk from a number I didn't know. The voice on the other end said things in a low, casual tone and then hung up. The name on my caller ID was blocked. We reported it to building security, but they shrugged and said there wasn't much they could do without a direct threat. On the 4th day, a package arrived for me, unmarked, left at reception. Inside was a receipt for my sandwich shop order. The time was the exact minute I usually placed it. There was a note on the receipt. He noticed when you skipped. I started coming in early and leaving late. I took different streets. I stopped wearing the same jacket. Sleep became a rumor. I watched where my coworkers looked and who looked back. Tony Stahl had a new pad of paper that he used to scribble names. Once, when I passed, he looked at me like someone staring at an old friend who has finally recognized a wound. One night, when the office was empty and the hum of the HVAC sounded like distant waves, I stayed late to finish a report. I saw a shadow move by the lobby cameras, but the feed was glitchy like static interfering with truth. I walked down to the lobby, phone flashlight sweeping, heart doing the kind of math where it multiplied fear. The front desk was empty. A thin scrap of red lipstick rested on the guest book page, a smear in the corner. It felt like a signature. 2 weeks later, my uncle was admitted to the hospital. Visiting him, I tried to keep my mind from the gnawing question. Is this about him? The detective, because of course it turned into something larger, told me quietly that the message on my mirror matched another from a case downstate. He said the style of writing and the choice. That night I went home and checked the mirror one last time. A single letter had appeared in the corner in fading red. N. Story 4, Buried Things. I had a small suburban yard that looked fine in postcards. Mown stripes, a chain-link fence, neighbors who said hello from a distance. I'm not a brave man, just ordinary, the kind that feels safer in routines. One Saturday in September I was mowing, headphones and mind on a podcast, doing the lines. The mower jerked, the blade stopped with a grunt. I turned off, tipped the deck, and at first thought I'd snagged a rock. It wasn't a rock. It was the corner of a black garbage bag wedged and looped through the housing. It tugged like something with weight. I pulled, and for a second my hands felt like they were in cold water. The bag came out weirdly light and oddly shaped, as if it had been packed by fingers that knew exactly how to hide things. I dug around anyway because that's what you do, you pry and you find. What I found was the sort of thing your brain has categories for but rarely needs. Small fabric, a pink shirt with a faded cartoon, tiny sneakers with scuffs, and bones the size of pen caps. Seeing it made my stomach flip as if I had excited the underside of the world. I dropped the bag like it burned. My neighbor, the man who kept to himself, was at his fence watching. He smiled in a way that made my back go cold. Found something interesting? He said, like a man telling a joke and waiting for laughter. He had one of those smiles that carried other things. It wasn't warmth. It suggested a story he had been keeping and finally could share. As I scrambled to call the police, he kept talking about kids wandering off and lessons learned. The way he said lessons was slow and careful, like someone labeling a collection. The police came, took the bag, and taped the scene. Forensics took pictures. They questioned me at length. I told them I'd never noticed anything odd about the property when I moved in. They told me the bag was shallow, too shallow for a long hidden thing. I told them the neighbor had been there. They wrote it down. He packed up that night and left. His house was later empty, curtains drawn. I watched from my kitchen window as a moving van trundled away and took something else with it that I couldn't name. The rest of the neighborhood seemed to orbit the discovery like it was a new moon you didn't want to stare at directly. People rang doorbells to ask if we were okay. Teenagers made videos with their phones as if this were entertainment. The police were polite but busy. After 3 days they said there were no leads they could share. The bag never sat right. The shoes were toddler small. The bones were examined with instruments that make bone into numbers. For a month the house next to mine remained empty and smelling of old curtains. I started to notice other things I'd ignored before. Little belongings stacked in odd places, a scent of old soap on the fence, small childish drawings near the mailbox half covered in mildew. I started to go over my neighbors' faces and count the time they'd lived here. The idea that someone could live next to you for years and keep a secret that's small but enormous made my skin tighten. A week after the bag, someone left a note on my doorstep. It had no name. It said a single line in shaky black ink. Some things don't get taught, they get taught to stay. The words sat like gravel in my mouth. I had to fight the urge to pack up and leave. But moving costs money. Money means compromise. Also, fear has a way of settling. After a while it becomes one of the things you live with, like the way summer smells or the shape of the gate. The detective called once, then twice, then not at all. He said their lab had a backlog. He said they were following leads. He said they were sorry. The news had a brief blip about missing children in adjacent counties, and the internet took its time making monsters about what we already feared. Interesting neighbors, basements, closet doors. People posted theories, some cruel, some hopeful. The comments thrummed with distance, lock your doors, and oh my god, and stay safe. It felt like playing a radio message into a room with no one you trusted. At night the house felt different. Sounds seemed to gather in corners. The fence no longer separated my yard from the next. It divided two stories, two possible truths. I started sleeping with lights on and doors latched tight. I stopped mowing. Grass grew long. My life pulled small and inward. Once, through a window, I thought I saw someone standing in what had been the neighbor's yard. A slight figure in the dusk, as if someone returned to check the seams. I handed my daughter's old stuffed rabbit, a relic from an old cousin, to a charity donation driver once. I had held it up and felt its small weight and thought about things you hand away. Afterwards, I would find the rabbit in my porch box at dawn 3 mornings in a row, damp and smelling of yard dirt. There's a certain aftertaste to choices you thought you'd made. The rabbit had tiny stitches, repairs I had made myself. The dirt on it matched the color in the torn garden. I couldn't know if someone returned it to torture me or returned it because they wanted me to remember. Months after the bag, the detective left a message. They'd cleaned the files and had a person of interest but not enough to charge. They asked if I could come down to identify some items. I walked into the station and felt like a tourist in my own life as they showed me photos in grayscale, small images of shoes and toys. One officer offered me coffee like decency can soak into everything. At the far end of the table, a small shoe sat under glass. I thought of the neighbor's smile. The last thing I remember, the last image that keeps me awake, is a winter night when I found a small shoe at my doorstep. Not the same pair as before, another tiny sneaker with mud on the toe. Tied to it was a scrap of paper with one typed word. Remembered that I'd like to say I threw it away. I didn't. I kept it in a shoebox like you keep other unsettling souvenirs, hoping the truth would show up with the rest. Evil rarely bursts from shadows wearing a coat of applause. It arrives quiet. It watches through holes we carved ourselves. It slips into the spaces between ordinary acts, an offered ride, a chewed door, a bathroom mirror, a buried bag. Each of these stories started normal. A break at work, a creak in a cheap door, a restroom visit, a Saturday morning chore. Normal is the perfect mask. If there's one thing to remember when the lights get thin and the air holds its breath, trust the tiny alarms your body sends. Not to be paranoid, but to be wise. Because sometimes the worst thing isn't that something supernatural crosses a threshold. It's that ordinary people build thresholds and keep the door closed on the rest of us. Evil doesn't hide in shadows. It hides in people we see every day.